Chapter 3, Family Reunion. Well, I must say, Alex, it's good to see you and the kids again. By the way, how's Rachel doing? Have you heard from her? Rodney asked, sipping down the last remnants of his beer before returning the bottle to its usual place by his now empty plate. Rodney and Alex were the last two at the table after dinner. The dinner table was now the quietest place in the house, with Marlene busily cleaning up the kitchen and putting things away, and the kids and Grandpa in the living room. Seth and Jimmy were just sitting on the couch listening to Grandpa JJ tell them more of his famous stories. On the floor in front of the TV was Bobby, whose real name was Roberta, but everyone just called her Bobby, and Leanne, who were busy playing a new video game, with little 5-year-old Nicole just watching. These were the sort of moments Alex enjoyed the most. He only wished Rachel could be here too. She's doing well. She told me just last week when we spoke on the phone that they had been told they'd probably be finished up soon, August or September at the latest. Alex paused, looking over into the family room. All I know is that the kids and I will sure be glad to have her home. It's been rough the last few months without Rachel around. Alex stood up from the table, gathering the last of the plates and silverware. Here, Rod, let me take these for you. He carefully picked up all the dirty dishes he could find and took them into the kitchen, setting them in the sink. Thanks, Marlene, for the wonderful dinner, as usual, offered a grateful Alex, patting her gently on the shoulder. You're welcome. It's good to have you guys here. It's been too long, and I know the kids really enjoy spending time together. Marlene gently reached over and nudged him back over towards the dining room and continued putting things away. Alex, you go sit down, have a beer and relax. You two have a lot of catching up to do. Actually, I don't mind if I do, said Alex, heading for the fridge. Rodney, can I grab you one? He spoke up from the kitchen. Yes, please, Rodney replied. Me too, replied Grandpa JJ from the living room, striking a surprised chuckle from the three in the kitchen. Well, at least we know you're hearing still good, Pops. Rodney laughed. A few moments later found Marlene, Rodney and Alex sitting at the table staring quietly off at the scene in the living room, with Grandpa JJ telling his stories to both the boys on the couch. You know, said Marlene, lowering her voice to a quiet whisper, breaking the silence. At some point you two are going to have to decide what to do with Grandpa when he's well enough to go home. Alex and Rodney simultaneously looked at Marlene, then Grandpa, then at each other. I mean, he's no burden to us and we've enjoyed having him around these last few years, but if his health starts to fade again, her voice trailed off as she was speaking and shaking her head. Then, picking up the conversation, Rodney continued. We look for a place for him to live, like the one down in Truth or Consequences. Marlene went over and quietly shut the double doors into the living room. That's too far away for us, Rodney, but I've checked around here. There are some places, real nice places, which are a lot closer to us, but maybe not as big. Marlene said. He's going to need someone to stay with him during the day, and you and I both work all day. Maybe he could come live with us for a while, suggested Alex. We got a spare room downstairs, and I'm sure Rachel wouldn't mind. Alex paused, rubbing his chin. Besides, there is a VA hospital close to us in Prescott. He should be able to get some nursing care through his VA benefits, I would think, but that really depends on how well he is. What did Dr. Forster say the other day about releasing him early? Marlene asked. He told me Grandpa JJ seemed to be doing much better, and if things continued to improve, there was no reason he couldn't go home. Rodney said. He thought a trip away for a few days should tell us how he's doing, and if we think we can handle him, then he would release him to us. Well, that's it then. If they think he's well enough to leave, then let me talk to Rachel about letting him stay with us for a while at our place this summer. That will give me some time to check with the VA hospital about the possibility of getting a home nurse to come and check on him when I start classes up this next fall. Alex finished his thought and went to the door of the living room to check on Grandpa JJ, who was now sound asleep in his chair. Rodney and Marlene were nodding their heads. Okay then. I will call Dr. Forster on Monday morning and see if we can get him released. Alex continued. Pops can then ride back to Prescott with us. The kids will be surprised. Suddenly he was hoping he hadn't spoken too soon about taking Grandpa home with him. It would be a lot of responsibility, but he remembered a time years ago when Grandpa JJ made a very similar decision to take two young boys into his home and raise them. This, he thought, would be his way of returning the favor. The next morning the Thompson house was the center of activity, with getting breakfast made for 5 hungry kids, and then those same kids running all around the house and busying themselves with fun and games. Marlene decided they all needed to get out of the house for a while. "Hey Rodney," Marlene called out, not seeing him but hoping he could hear. "Maybe you and Alex could take the kids fishing down at the wildlife reserve or take them for the day to the visitor center at the VLA?" Marlene suggested. Alex heard and nodded his approval. "Good idea, Marlene, I'll go find Rodney." Alex looked around, noticing both Rodney and Grandpa JJ weren't anywhere inside the house and began searching for them outside. He then found them both out in the workshop on the side of the house. "I should have known better," he thought. That was always his favorite place to go and get away from it all. When he stepped through the door of the workshop, he found Grandpa JJ and Rodney huddled intently over an old radio of some sort. "Hey Alex, come here. Take a look at what I picked up last month at a yard sale up in Albuquerque." Rodney motioned him over to look. Grandpa JJ was busy poking around inside the cabinet of an old radio with some of his tools and a flashlight. "What are you doing there, Pop?" "Well, I'll be." A 1935 General Electric AM radio, model A66, Grandpa JJ said proudly. "Had one just like it around the house when I was in high school. I remember when my dad brought it home from the store. I'm going to take a look at it and see if we can get it working." Rodney looked at Alex, grinning from ear to ear. "Well, that's great, Pop. Something new to keep you occupied," Alex said, patting Rodney softly on the back. What a genius, he thought. If there was one thing Grandpa JJ loved, it was tinkering around with radios and electronics. "You boys know that my dad had that radio on every night listening to his favorite shows. President Roosevelt's Fireside Chats, The Shadow, and my favorite, Orson Welles' Mercury Theater. We didn't have TVs then, you know. We had to use our imaginations," he said, tapping the side of his head. "All you kids today with your DVDs, video games, and high definition, have no need for your imaginations anymore." "Okay, Pop, okay," Rodney said, lightly chuckling. "So, you think you can fix up this old thing?" Grandpa JJ nodded his head in affirmation. "Give me a couple of hours and I think we'll have this old radio working like new again." He stroked the wooden cabinet. "She's been taken pretty good care of, no doubt. I'm going to need a soldering iron and some small tools," he said, looking over toward the cabinets. "Should all be right over there where I left them." JJ looked down at the radio again. "War of the Worlds," he mumbled. "What was that?" asked Alex. He thought for a second. "War of the Worlds? Oh, I know, you're talking about that old movie, huh, Pop?" "No, not the movie, but the radio show. The one they aired in 1938, around Halloween if I remember right. My dad had his radio on that night as usual, and the show came on, but sounded like a real news bulletin. Scared the hell out of some of the folks around here though. They thought it was a real alien invasion." "No kidding," said Rodney, looking over at Alex, who just shrugged his shoulders. "I only remember the movie, Pop." "Humph," JJ continued. His thoughts began to distance themselves. "Not everyone gets a chance to meet a real alien," he mumbled in a low voice to barely be heard. "Did I ever tell you about my friend Allen Larkin?" JJ asked, speaking up now. "About what happened to him?" Grandpa JJ had just begun to tell the story of the crashed airplane when a loud knock was heard on the workshop door. "Have you two decided what you're going to do today?" Marlene asked with a hint of irritation in her voice. Alex suddenly realized he had forgotten his original mission. "Hey Rodney, what do you say we take the kids for a ride out to the VLA and let them take the tour through the visitor center? I know Jimmy and Leanne haven't been out there before and maybe Pops might be up to coming along." Grandpa JJ and Rodney nodded their heads. Marlene smiled. Great. I'll pack a lunch for everyone. Marlene quickly turned and left for the kitchen. I think she wants us out of her hair for a while, said Rodney. Alex and Grandpa JJ both laughed. Alex and Rodney gathered the kids together and told them to get ready to go for a ride out to the VLA. Jimmy and Leanne looked puzzled until Dad explained to them that the VLA was a large array of antennas used to study deep space and take pictures of stars. He said it was a kind of observatory, just like Kitt Peak was, but with radio waves. The SUV was packed and nearly ready to go, so packed that you might think, just by looking at it, that it was being prepared for a week-long expedition. But with 3 men and 4 children being prepped for a day ride, there was a certain amount of necessary baggage that was required. Marlene decided it would be best to keep the youngest, Nicole, at home with her. She felt that having a 5-year-old around might just slow them down. Finally, just about the time the other 4 were all set to go, one of them would suddenly forget something of course that they needed to take with them, such as a favorite book or video game. Jimmy took one such opportunity to go back into the house for something he had forgotten as well. Running into the back room where the suitcases were kept, and where Grandpa JJ had been sleeping, he noticed Grandpa JJ's suitcase had been knocked off onto the floor. Probably Leanne or Dad was in a hurry before he came in and didn't realize what happened, so Jimmy began carefully picking up Grandpa JJ's stuff and replacing it into his suitcase, which had been on the bed. Jimmy grabbed his own backpack and, reaching into his own suitcase, he pulled out a magazine he had brought along to read. That was when he noticed something laying on the floor by the door of the guest bedroom. Hello, where did you come from? He thought. It was too large to be a billiard ball, way too small to be a bowling ball. It appeared to be about 2 to 3 inches in diameter and was crystal clear. Immediately he sensed something remarkable about it that was drawing it to him for some strange reason. He slowly knelt on the floor next to the sphere, picking it up gently with both hands. He instantly noticed how heavy it felt in his hands, feeling, caressing, and examining it carefully. Not having as much time as he would have liked to continue with his examination, he placed the sphere and the magazine hastily into his backpack. He then ran quickly back to the SUV and climbed in. Moments later, they were heading up the highway to the VLA. Somewhere on the road between Socorro, New Mexico, and the visitor center at the VLA, Jimmy had reached into the back of the SUV for his backpack, searching for the magazine he had brought along to show Seth, and had unzipped it, leaving it slightly open when he was done. Open just wide enough to allow the sun to shine in and onto the sphere he had brought along with him. Apparently, it had not been exposed to any direct sunlight for quite some time. Fortunately, it wouldn't need much exposure. Within the sphere, the scant beams of sunlight were now being collected, processed, and stored. Trillions of infinitesimally tiny circuits were starting to come to life again after so many years without the power to sustain them. Even so, it would take some time again before it reached its full power, but it would be enough. The Thompson family's SUV pulled into the visitor center just after noon. It didn't take long after arrival for Seth, or maybe it was Leanne, to instigate a chain reaction of hunger cries amongst the other passengers, and then, before they knew it, everyone was digging into the cooler for the sandwiches and soda that Marlene had earlier prepared for everyone. Grandpa JJ and Alex had found a nearby table to sit at after collecting their meals. How are you doing there, Pop? Good, just enjoying the view. Glad to be out and about again. Yeah, I'll bet. It's a beautiful day. Incredible place. Alex's voice trailed off for a few seconds as he took in the scenery around them. The sky was incredibly clear and blue today, standing in stark contrast to the amazing high desert landscape of northern New Mexico. One could find it easy to believe they were thousands of miles from civilization. Save for the giant antennas spread out in every direction, one might think they were on another planet. I was talking about you. How are you feeling? Alex forced himself back to reality. Oh, I am starting to feel my old self again. I think the fresh air is helping too. That pneumonia really takes everything out of you, said JJ. Good, good. Alex nodded, and then continued. Well, Pop, Rodney and were talking last night. I would like to have you come home and live with us in Prescott for a while. We got room at our new place. I'll fix up the extra room, and we even have a little workshop in the basement you can tinker around in. What do you think of that? Are you sure? Is Rachel okay with this? I don't know, son. I don't want to be a bother to you two, you know. No, it isn't a problem at all, Pop. In fact, I think the kids will enjoy having you around. They love your stories, you know. You could write a book with all your stories. Grandpa JJ laughed. Yep, guess I should have, years ago, getting too old now. He paused and glanced contemplatively between Alex and Rodney, who was headed over to their table where all the kids were eating. You two have done well for yourselves, I must say. I'm really proud of both of you. What's that? Asked Rodney, jumping into the conversation. I said, I'm really proud of you two boys. You got great families and you both came through life with your heads screwed on straight. I'm not sure about that last part, Pops, joked Rodney. Alex laughed. I know, you had a rough time there with us too for a little while. Bet you wanted to throw us out of the house for a few years then, huh, Pops? Asked Alex. You two didn't do anything that my brothers and I didn't do when we were teenagers. My oldest brother Ted just about got himself killed back in '33 running whiskey up and down from Santa Fe. Did you know that? Rodney and Alex shrugged, another one of Pop's stories that they hadn't heard yet it seemed, but listened intently. Ted was running whiskey back and forth up there for some of the big Hollywood movie stars who were making their new westerns. It was for their parties that they were having after filming had been finished for the day. Ted and some of his friends made the best homemade corn whiskey you ever tasted. JJ grinned. Anyway, the Reevaners caught on to their activities and tried to shut them down on a few occasions. One time they were waiting for them on the road up there. Ted had to take a detour, almost lost it in one of the canyons before they finally made it out. Anyway, next year Roosevelt changed the law and things kind of cooled down after that. Grandpa JJ paused, looking at Alex and Rodney. And I bet you didn't know this. If your dad hadn't have gotten drafted when he did, he would have probably wound up in trouble himself. He was a wild kid, the thrill seeker. He loved flying though, and he sure loved those helicopters. I'm afraid my Leanne has some of those qualities as well, Pops. She's our little thrill seeker in the family. Jimmy, why he always seems to overthink things more than his sister, Alex added. Well guys, I think I see them getting finished up now. We better get moving. I'll go sign in and get the tickets, said Alex, getting up and going into the visitor center. The Thompson family finished their lunch and assembled with the others for the first part of their tour. So far, this trip had been uneventful, but things were about to change. Jimmy had reached the last part of the walking tour when he decided he had walked enough for now and it was time to take a break, sit down for a minute to rest and have a drink of water. He was now alone. Seth, Dad and the others had gone ahead and were playing around with one of the whisper antennas located near the outside of the visitor center. Jimmy carefully set his backpack on the bench next to him and reached in and grabbed a water bottle when he noticed the sphere that he had placed in there earlier and took it out to examine it more closely. As he reached in and grabbed the sphere and brought it out into the light once again, a sudden wave of dizziness and nausea came over him. He felt like he was just getting off one of those crazy carnival rides that spin you around in circles. Looking up again after the dizziness subsided, he saw the sphere floating motionless in air in front of him and then someone standing in front of him. It had the appearance of a young hairless boy, but yet was not a boy, and was standing motionless a few feet directly in front of him. He was somewhat shorter than Jimmy in size and had deep brown eyes and was just staring at him, not in a mean way, just in a sort of a pleasantly curious way. Hello Jimmy, the boy said. Hello, who are you? Do I know you? Jimmy hesitantly asked, not sure if he really heard the boy's voice or not since he didn't see his lips move at all. My name is Reevan, he said. Your grandfather JJ and I met a long time ago. Where did you come from, Anne? Jimmy stuttered somewhat, looking around for the others, not sure if someone was playing a trick on him. How do you know me and my grandpa JJ? Is this a joke? Did my cousin Seth put you up to this? He looked over at the others who were still busy playing around with the whisper antennae too far away to be aware of the strange visitor that Jimmy was now talking to. This is not a joke, Jimmy, and don't worry, they can't see or hear me. Reevan said. Only you can. I am a projection of the image of Reevan, stored in the memory. A projection? Stored in the memory of what? Jimmy interrupted. Of the sphere, the one that you brought with you, the one you see right before you. Reevan's image motioned to the sphere. The image you see is being projected into your mind. Jimmy stood up quickly, tapping on the sphere, which was floating in air, with the finger of one hand, while holding onto his water bottle with the other. He took a swipe across the image of the boy with the water bottle and it passed through him as if it were passing through air. Then he looked at Reevan's image again. The image smiled slightly and made a motion of tapping a finger on the side of his head. I'm all up here, Jimmy, I am in your mind. Reevan said. Jimmy sat back down on the bench, took another drink of water, then suddenly stopped drinking and examined the contents of his bottle. I must be out of my mind, Jimmy thought. Our thoughts are linked now. Reevan explained. What do you want? Asked Jimmy. I am here to give you a message. Years ago, your great-grandfather and a friend of his found our spaceship after it had crashed and offered help to us. My crew and I had been collecting data and information on human activities, and all the data we collected was stored in this sphere immediately following the crash. The image again motioned to the sphere Jimmy was holding. Oh, I see, like a flash drive. Jimmy said. Yes, Jimmy, exactly. Your grandfather had the sphere in his possession for many years, but for some reason, was never able to fully link to it as you are linked now. Unfortunately, he kept the sphere locked away in the box. You helped restore the power cells in the sphere when you inadvertently placed the sphere in the sunlight. Thanks to you, in a few moments I will be able to use this array to upload all the mission data that I have collected. When I do this, however, it may bring unwanted attention to you and your family. My scans indicate that those who oversee this facility have the capability of tracking the source of this transmission. You should leave the area before this happens, insisted Reevan. You said you were linked to my thoughts. What does that mean? When you found the sphere and left it in the light, you fully restored its power. A backup program within the sphere was then activated, linking your thought patterns with the sphere. That is all I can tell you for now, Jimmy. I must upload my data soon while the position is good for the alignment of the array. The image of Reevan flickered as he continued, I will be in contact with you again soon. Goodbye, Jimmy. As quickly as the image appeared, it vanished again. Jimmy blinked a few times and rubbed his eyes, not entirely sure if he was just imagining all this or not. Jimmy looked around for the others and saw them heading for the SUV. He then quickly replaced the water bottle and sphere back into his backpack, zipped it up and ran to where the others were gathering. Hey, it's about time, dude. We were wondering what happened to you. You missed the last part of the tour. Seth teased. Where you been? I was thirsty, and my legs were tired. I went and sat down on the bench to rest and lost track of time, I guess. Bobby and Leanne were busy taking some last-minute pictures of several jackrabbits that had wandered close to the visitor center, probably looking for handouts of food from the leftover lunches. Dad and Grandpa JJ were standing over by one of the large antennas that was nearest the center taking some pictures and talking. Uncle Rodney was over by the SUV loading up some of the bags and backpacks into the back. Seth, did you notice any strange-looking people on the tour with us? Say, like short kids with dark brown eyes and with no hair? Jimmy asked. What are you talking about? Seth looked at Jimmy then started laughing. Bald-headed kids. No dude, sorry, and kept laughing. This is getting me nowhere, he thought. Jimmy ran over to where his dad and Grandpa JJ were standing, interrupting their conversation. Dad, we need to get going. Jimmy nervously exclaimed. Alex turned around and looked at Jimmy with a confused expression. You okay, Jimmy? Not really, I think I'm feeling a little sick to my stomach all of a sudden. Jimmy made a sickly-looking face, the kind he made when he wanted to stay home from school, and then held on to his stomach with his hands. I think something I ate earlier didn't agree with me, Dad, he suggested, hoping his dad would believe his performance. All right then, well, we'll start getting everybody together, I guess. Excuse me, Pop, and his dad turned and left, walking towards the girls who were still giggling and taking pictures of the jackrabbits. Now it was just him and his grandpa JJ standing alone together. With the two of them both looking up at the antennae array, Jimmy thought carefully about his next question. Grandpa JJ, do you think we'll ever really find life out there in space? Jimmy asked before he turned and headed back to the SUV.
You've been listening to The Thompson Sphere by David E. Farmer, also now available on Amazon's Kindle. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more chapters coming soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.